So today's session is about another product development approach. So today, what is on agenda for us? Today, we are going to learn about another product development approach. We've already learned about one product development approach. We've already learned about Agile, but today we are going to learn about predictive, sometimes called Waterfall, sometimes called plan-driven, sometimes also called sequential, and sometimes called structured approach, right? Different names. In the industry that we are part of, waterfall or sometimes plan-driven are the terms, or is the terminology that is being used. Predictive, your managers themselves would not know what predictive means if you use that word, right? So I can ask you to steer away from it. Waterfall. We learned about Agile. Another product development approach is waterfall. In predictive, what we learned was that products are developed in an iterative fashion. In waterfall or plan-driven approaches, sometimes called predictive approaches, products are developed in more like, in a complete whole. They're developed as a complete whole, or we try to create a very stable product. Some people feel that Agile is the way to go, but that's not true. Shipping industry, rockets, aerospace, construction, Agile doesn't work there. The mindset can be applied, but the approach, incremental approach, cannot be applied, right? So Agile works really, really well in software industry, and the mindset, however, can be applied to almost every industry. So today, what we are going to do is we're going to learn about, so this is what we're trying to achieve today. We're going to learn about, first of all, you already know this, but we'll review this one more time. We learn about waterfall approach. That's what we will learn about today. We learn about the role of a business analyst in waterfall approach. Just like in Agile approach, we had the role of a business analyst. And in waterfall approach, this role of a business analyst is really well defined. The role of a business analyst is really well defined because this is a plan-driven approach. And another role emerges in waterfall. It is also there in Agile, but emerges in waterfall, and the role is called business system analyst. So you could be working as a business analyst, and I call a business analyst someone who works on the front end of product development, and business system analyst is someone who works in the middle somewhere, and later parts, right? These two roles of business analyst and business system analysis, they work in a very collaborative fashion. But business analyst is someone who collects the requirements of stakeholders, and business system analyst is someone who takes these requirements from the business analyst and decomposes them further. So takes the requirement, so business system analyst takes the requirement from a business analyst, decomposes them further into some documents. Let's not worry about what the name of the document is today, into some documents that are better consumable, that are consumable by information technology team or development team. They understand it a little bit better than a one-line statement called requirement document, right? So you could be working as a business analyst and hand over these business requirement document to a business system analyst, or in some organization, there is a dual role of a business analyst and a business system analyst. So we're going to learn about both the roles, but today we will look at business analyst working in Waterfall approach, right? So I was reading something day before yesterday and said, if you wanted to fly, then you have to give up everything that weighs you down. You got to give up everything. So you got to find time. From here on, this gets even more serious, because even if you know 15% of business analysis, I still like you to go for an interview if I have a position with one of the people that we know, right? We don't leave. So even if you have 15% done, even if you don't know business analysis from today on, and you feel that I'm not there, and if I feel that you're there, if I feel that you're there and there is a role, you are going for an interview. You know enough now, right? After this session, you know enough. And keep this in mind. None of the business analysts who are working out there know it all. No one knows it all, right? All of us know only what we work on. There's so much that we do not know about, right? So let's not worry about what we don't know about. Let's worry about what would come in the interview, and we should be ready with that, right? So from today onwards, you have to be really, really ready, because markets are slowing down a little bit because of recession right now. So what we saw last month or month before, everything was really good. Right now, it's not. It's good, but it's not so good as couple of months ago, right? So every opportunity, tough or easy, that comes our way, we got to nail it. You get an interview, you're not getting a second interview till I have given an interview to almost everyone in the class, and if they're ready, right? This is how this process works. So everyone must nail their first interview. No pressure. You will only go in an interview where you know everything, right? Or sometimes I'll push you in to learn something for yourself, for me, right? So failure is not what is going to determine whether you will be a BA or not with us. That's not the idea, but I need to give one opportunity, one interview to each one of you. If you are prepared, if you're not prepared, forget about it, right? Really, you got to be very fluent with the script that's coming your way. All right. So let's talk about predictive approach a little bit today. So let's write here waterfall. So we'll call it waterfall now. Waterfall or plan driven. And as you saw in the previous slide, they also call predictive, sequential, and so many other names, right? So just like agile approaches, where you created a product backlog, starting point of a project was to understand the needs of stakeholders and document the requirements. In waterfall approaches, also, if you're developing a product, first, who are you developing this product for? For your stakeholders. So starting point is understanding the requirements of your stakeholders. And this is the work of a business analyst. Some of you, if you get really lucky, you will end up here. Really good way to start your career, right? But 90% of people have not started here recently with us. So requirements, all projects, they start with requirement phase. In Agile, we could call it iteration 0 or iteration planning to prioritize the requirement. In waterfall or plan-driven approaches, we call it requirement phase. And in the requirement phase, the business analyst works and creates a business requirement document. Not only creates a business requirement document, the business analyst also gets this document approved, right? Our job is just not to go to the stakeholders and capture their requirements and drop them in some kind of a tool or a template. That's not necessarily our role. That's just half. Really and truly, business requirements are deemed complete when you have got them approved. And last week, we talked about all these other supplementary documents associated associated documents completed with business requirement documents. So waterfall projects start with this first phase called the requirement phase. During this time, business analyst is the role. And this person works very closely with stakeholders and creates something called a business requirement document, sometimes also called BRD. You will hear BRD. You won't hear business requirement document, right? BRD. And you as a business analyst will capture all these or document or elicit all these requirements, and it is your job to facilitate a session to get them approved. So business requirements are approved. What happens in the next phase is that the project goes into design. Some organizations call this phase as analysis and design. The project goes into design phase. During this time, the BA, business analyst, and the business system analyst work together very closely, and they start decomposing the business requirement document. They start decomposing the requirements listed in the BRD. There's a little more detail than this to this idea, but right now I'm just trying to give you the big picture. So during the design phase, the business analyst and the business system analyst would work together in a very collaborative fashion, and they will start decomposing the requirements listed in the business requirement document, or providing more details to these requirements. And they would do this using you could say a technique, you could say a tool, you could say a document called use case scenario. How do they decompose these business requirements? They decompose them using use case scenarios. And we are going to learn about it not today, but in the next session. What are use case scenarios, right? So now look, if you went in the interview and they said, could you please tell us what was your most recent project, and if this project is about waterfall project, then you would say, well, my most recent project was with RBC Bank, and I've been working with them since June 2019. The primary purpose of the project was to provide similar transactional capabilities as was available in the online or brand channel to the mobile channel. My work started during requirement phase itself, and I started working with my stakeholders in understanding their needs and documenting them in the business requirement document. Once the business requirement document was signed off or approved, I started working very closely with the BSA, or you can say I started decomposing these business requirements into another specification, and it is called solution requirements. I started decomposing them using use case scenarios. And once this document called solution requirement document, or some organizations call it software requirement specification, is signed off, you hand over these solution requirement documents or these software requirement specifications to the development team, and development team starts doing the work. They start doing the work, or they start creating the deliverable. So if the product is a website, the development team has started coding the website, and they started developing the deliverable. Now look, development team, requirement number 3 does not understand requirement number 3 on the BRD or the SRD document. What do they do? They send an email to the business analyst or the business system analyst, because now they have become the point of contact. This is what we do, right? We required throughout the journey of product development. Now they become point of contact, and the development team, let's say I'm a developer, I send you an email, hey, by the way, Mustafa, I don't understand requirement number 3. Could you please explain that to me? So during development phase, the development team is busy developing or creating the deliverable, but if they seek or want any clarifications on the requirement, they ask you, and you become the point of contact and provide those clarifications. And sometimes if you're not able to provide these clarifications, you facilitate sessions with larger groups to build some consensus on on some solutions that are required here, right? So during development, you become the point of contact. So what does the BA do here? The BA here, so BA's role here, developers are developing. The BA during, or BA or BSA during this time has become the point of contact. So the development team, so you become the point of contact. Point of contact. Now the development team has created the website, let's say. You have helped them in a very collaborative fashion whenever they had confusion, whenever they needed clarifications. You have provided those clarifications. Now what happens? Now the development team has created the website. The testing teams comes into the picture. The QA teams comes into the picture and testing starts. They start testing the website. So let's say this is your website. You wrote the requirement. Let's say your requirement document said, we need a home page. We need an about us page. We need a contact page. And you need a blog. You got these requirements signed off. Then the designers came, you, the BSA, you created some kind of mock-ups like this, a design. Just a mock-up, right? Maybe a picture with hand, or maybe the UI team or the UX team, user experience team created some sort of a mock-up. These requirements, the 4 requirements and the mock-ups were handed over to the development team. The development team now built the website, which looked like this. Said, here you go, the home page. Then they created the about us page, contact page, and the blog. They created everything. Once they created the product, they handed it over to the testing team. What did the test team do, or QA, sometimes called quality assurance team? What did they do? They said, so development team created home page, about us page, contact page, and blog. This is what they did. Now the QA came and said, requirement says right here in the requirement document says homepage. Where is the homepage? Here you go, it's here. Everything is here as the client wanted it. It's a pass. Homepage is a pass. About us page, second requirement, where is it on the website? Right here. Contact, blog, there are. And if they clicked on the blog and nothing appeared, it was all empty, or a 404 error came, server error came, you created a defect and said, well, when I click on a blog, on the website, it's not working, and you send it back to the development team, and development team did the fixes and all that, right? Right now, either your product testers can say your product is a 0 defect product, or the testers can say, hey, by the way, you have defects and you got to fix them, right? When this website had no defects, or some defects that were acceptable to the business team came and did another testing called UAT or BAT. And you are the one who is representing the business along with the business, the stakeholders. You're the one who is kind of like the face of the business as a business analyst, and you started looking at all this website and started making sure that it conformed to the requirements. Whatever product was created, it conformed to the requirements. You did UAT or BAT, user acceptance testing or business acceptance testing. You facilitated this. You facilitated as a BA, you facilitated UAT and BAT. And when the business says, we like what we see, or when they accepted it, this product got deployed. And this idea of requirement phase followed by design phase followed by development phase, followed by testing phase, and then deployment phase is called the waterfall way of product development, or the predictive way of product development, or sometimes called the plan-driven way. Very structured. You collect the requirement first, and when the requirements, so let's write it down here. So product development using waterfall starts with requirement phase, followed by design phase, followed by development phase, followed by test, where the testing team may first test the product, followed by the business team who may do the UAT and BAT, sometimes also called acceptance testing, and then the product will get deployed. Waterfall. Why is it called waterfall? Because you cannot start designing until and unless the requirements are completed, or the requirements, they fall into design phase. The designs, they fall into development phase. The development, when development is done, then the testing can start. And when testing both by QA team and business team is completed, then the deployment can start. Right? That's why it's called waterfall. One phase falls into the next phase. Requirements must be completed for design to start. Designs must be established for development to start. Development must be completed and ready for testing to start. Testing, the QAs will test to ensure that the product has reached a very stable, or ideally a zero defect state. And at that point of time, the business owners come and they do some kind of acceptance testing. Sometimes it will be called user acceptance testing. Some organizations like to call it business acceptance testing. Once the business owners and the business analyst has accepted the product is when deployment starts, right? So if you go in a very structured organization, let's just say RBC and TD Bank, start working with them. You know, this phase right here, this is the job of a business analyst. To ensure that the BRD is completed. BRD is completed. The design and the early stages of development is the job of a business system analyst. They will decompose the business requirements and create a document called SRD. In CIBC, they call it SRD, Solution Requirement Document. Some organizations, some other banks call it SRS, or Solution Requirement Specifications. Now, from here on, it could be the BA or BSA working in a very collaborative fashion. And their goal will remain to get acceptance from business so that the product can be deployed. That's their goal. And they also become point of contact. They provide clarifications on requirement, right? They're like working with all the teams to ensure that they have everything that they need. And if there are any questions, they're there to answer those questions. So before we move forward from here, do we all understand the difference between Agile and Waterfall first? Everyone understands the difference, right? Agile, more incremental. Waterfall, more predictive, where you predict the future during requirement itself. You predict the future. These are my requirements and this is what I'm developing, right? Or you create a heavy plan and you follow it to the T. You make sure that the product is very stable and most of the stakeholders' requirement become part of the solution, right? So when you go in an interview, especially RBC interviews, and every batch that we have, some of our folks work for RBC. A popular question is, how about you tell us the difference between, or question is, what are the different, they won't even say product development approaches, they will just say different approaches you have used or you worked on. And let's say, based on what you know, if you had to give a two-word answer, Mona, you would say?
Waterfall and Agile.
Very good. Waterfall and Agile, right? So if someone said, what are the two different approaches you worked on? I worked on two major approaches, most prevalent approaches. One is Waterfall and one is Agile, which is more incremental, right? Now look, but the managers does not stop with this. They say, what are the different approaches you have used or you know about, and what are the differences? What are the differences? Based on what we know, Waterfall approach works really well when the requirements are clear from the stakeholders. Requirements are clear, right? You want to build a part and stakeholders have provided all the requirements. They're very clear. Then why would I go incremental? I don't have to go incremental. Incremental approaches are used when there is no end state clarity. So agile approaches, the requirements are not very clear in the beginning. So you only deliver or develop what is clear to you, what is stable. That's number one. Number two, any project where stakeholders can provide you end state clarity. Any project when stakeholders can clearly define how the end state will look like, or they can say, I want my website to look like Amazon. They're very clear about what they need. Go waterfall. Why do you want to give them increments when the stakeholders already know what they want? And agile approaches are when there is lack of end state clarity. Use agile, right? If you got to fail fast. Don't create something that stakeholders don't want. If you don't have end state clarity, go agile, right? The idea of fail fast. Don't create something that stakeholders may not want. And when when value delivery needs to be sooner because of competitive reasons, because of other factors, you should go agile, you should go incremental. And here, value delivery may be delayed. But organizations do not say, well, I want to use agile because I like agile. Or organizations do not say, I want to use waterfall because I like waterfall. Organizations choose a certain methodology because of some of these factors that we just created together right now. These are some of the factors that organizations may think about, right? They may look into before saying, well, I think for X project, we should go agile. For Y project, we should go waterfall, right? So are we good with this? Right? One of the very popular questions. So let's hear it from maybe Yassine. What are the different approaches you have used, and why would you choose Waterfall or Agile over each other, right? Why do you choose Agile over Waterfall?
Some of the different approaches I've used include Agile and Waterfall. I would use the Agile approach more when the requirements are clear, they lack end state clarity, and the value delivery is sooner. In opposed to that Waterfall, where the requirements are more clear, there is more end state clarity, but the value may be kind of delivered later.
Okay, so Agile, sorry, there was a typo there. Agile requirements are not very clear. I think that's what you're trying to correct.
That's what I was going to ask about right now too.
Yeah, I saw your body. Like, this is what body language is. If you don't, cameras are not on, I would never know. But I already knew that. I think you were pointing to this. So requirements are not clear in Agile, right? So thank you for that. All right, awesome. So there we go. One of the very important questions: why do we use Agile? It's not something that because I like Agile, that's why I would use Agile, or I like Waterfall, that's why I continue to use Waterfall. Choose an approach based on the needs of stakeholders. Apart from that, you may also think about the needs of the stakeholders. You may also think about other aspects, right? It could be cultural also. If an organization has never worked in an environment where you have to work together, you might not go agile actually, right? You cannot just say, here you go, I'm going to cut the current way of product development and move into an entire new way. To use agile, when organizations have started making this shift towards agile, they're also bringing with it a culture shift. People have a mindset, right? And of course, there is resistance towards any new approach. So what are most of the organizations doing? Most of the organizations are training their stakeholders. They're bringing that culture shift that is required for agile approaches to flourish, right? Okay, all right. So let's go back to our picture of predictive approaches. Now we will add some more level of detail. Right now we kept it a little bit high level. Now add some more level of detail. You know, when a project starts, when any project starts, you will join a project, right? When a project starts, the project managers have some information with them. And this information is things like, we got 3 months to do the work. Sponsors have given us 3 months to do the work. In 3 months, we have to get this project out to the customer. The sponsor is saying, well, you got only 500K to do this work, right? So this information is available in the beginning itself. As a business analyst, you may not even know this information, but project managers who are managing this project from the beginning to the very end, or who are managing the development of the product, they are aware of this information, because sponsors, it's just like this, right? Let's just say Anita wanted to renovate her, let's say, bathroom. She wants to renovate her bathroom. She calls the contractor. One of the first few things that she tells the contractor is, well, you know what? I got only 4 weeks to do this work, and I have 10 grand for this. And then what happens? Contractor says, okay, I'll keep this in mind. Project manager says to the sponsor, or project manager tells Nita, I want to keep this in mind, right? Now the sponsor says, all right, with this understanding that I have 3 months to develop this product and hand it over to my customers, and I only have 500K, let us start this project. And the project goes into the requirement phase. And what happens in requirement phase? In requirement phase, now emerges the business analyst, and the business analyst starts meeting the stakeholders and creates the business requirement document. The business requirement document contains, now Nita wants top of the line appliances. She has the budget of 10K, but she wants top of the line appliances in the kitchen, and they themselves are now $40,000. You got a 10K budget. But when she gave requirements, she started saying, well, I would like this kind of a dishwasher. I like this fridge. I like another fridge. I like 2 ovens. And she starts giving all these requirements, right? Or I like my tiles or my floors to be heated in the kitchen. I would like. They're giving needs and they're also giving desires. The same happens in this project also, where there are 3 months and 500K. In the business requirement, business analysts go very detailed and they collect maybe 120 requirements. And they get it signed off too. In the requirement phase, they get it signed off. Stakeholders want this. When the project manager looks at it, the project manager tells the business analyst, let's say the business analyst now is Mona, tells Mona, well, Mona, great job on the requirements, 120 requirements, but I can tell you right now that we can deliver these 120 requirements in 3 months, first of all, and secondly, we only have 500K. So what do we need to do? Before we even start designing this, before we even go here to start designing this work or creating mock-ups and wireframes for this website, before we even go there, you know what? We got to work with our stakeholders here, and you got to facilitate a session to prioritize the requirements. Let us prioritize the requirements. Let us understand what is it that is critical to the stakeholders and what fits into 3 months and 500K. Every project, guys, has a constraint profile, a boundary. And the boundary could be, we have 3 months to do the work and we got 500K. So what does the team do? They prioritize all these 120 requirements and they start. So look, take a look at this picture. So you got a boundary of your project, and this boundary says you got 3 months to do the work. Plus you got $500,000. And here you go, you got 120 requirements prioritized. You have worked with your stakeholders, prioritize them now, 220. So what are you doing? You take the first most important requirement and you throw it into the scope. You say, how long will it take? He said, it will take about 7 days. 3 months means 90 days. So you got 90 days. Take 7 days. Okay, how much would it cost? This will be, so the first required will be 20K. So out of 500K, 20K is already burned, and 7 days are burned for requirement number 1. Requirement number 2, the critical requirement. It will take 1 month. Look at this. Out of 3 months, 1.7 or 1.25 months are burned. So look, this is what happens. This is what the team does. And when they feel, so let's say 74 requirements and 500K and 3 months are burned, this is what will be delivered as a part of the project. Prioritization. One of the very important test of your skill when you start working as a business analyst is when you have all these stakeholders, just like yourself, Rupam, we got Yasin, we got Mona, we got Salim, we got Mustafa, we got Visma, we have Asia, and we have who else are we missing? Nida. We got all these different stakeholders. They've given me requirements. When stakeholders give me requirement, is it fair to say that they have an expectation that their requirement will become part of the solution? Is that fair? If you spend 2 hours with me giving your requirement to me, would you not expect that your requirement should become part of the solution? Or would you just tell me that, well, the sponsor just gave you 500K and 3 months. I'm going to be kind to you, the business analyst, and I will ask you not to deliver my requirement. Is that what we do? No, right? Even during Christmas, when you go to your parents and your parents say, well, tell us what would you want? Sometimes you do not know, right? We are so immature sometimes in our life, or we are so mature, right? So that we'll say, oh, I like to have an ATV. That would be so much fun to drive in the backyard. But maybe the parents only have a budget of 10 grand. for all of your sibling and yourself, right? But now you said that I'm going to give you something. I want an ATV, and there you go, right? You're stuck with this. I want this. Just like that, stakeholders also, just because they've given you a requirement, they will not let you go without their requirement becoming part of the solution. So art of business analysis lies in your ability to prioritize the requirement and your ability to say no to Salim, unfortunately, we cannot deliver the requirement. Why? Because your requirement do not fit our prioritization model, right? You should be able to tell that to Salim, and Salim should say, I think I agree. I think I agree with this, right? So now let me give you an example of this. One of the greatest challenges that most of the business analysts have faced on almost every project is when they collect the requirements, now they have to give the bad news to the stakeholder. Well, Anita, well, Mustafa, well, Yasin, your requirements will not be delivered. Because stakeholders are so powerful, they will never let you off the hook so easily. You will have to give them a justifiable reason. You will have to give them a reason that they feel that is the legitimate reason. You know why? Because the role of a business analyst, and what does a business analyst do, what does a business analyst do? The primary responsibility of a business analyst is to ensure that legitimate rights and expectations of stakeholders are met. So legitimate rights and expectations of stakeholders, we got to ensure that they are met, right? Not all these desires that I want an ATV and you are not going to ride it for more than a day. That doesn't work, right? So good business analysts, they ensure that legitimate rights and expectations of stakeholders are satisfied. So you collected these 120 requirements, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 120 requirements. You go through each and every requirement and you create a criteria, and the criteria is what is the level of or what business value does a certain requirement bring? What is the stakeholder agreement? What is the urgency of this requirement? Is this requirement of some regulatory nature? What kind of risk does this requirement pose to us, or threat? Let's say risk is a threat. Risk is also an opportunity. Let's just say threat here. What kind of a threat does it pose to us? And we could also say, what is this requirement a low-hanging fruit? Sometimes called, what is the likelihood of success of this requirement? Low-hanging fruit, likelihood of success, or a quick win, with minimal effort, you can deliver it, right? So now look, stakeholder requirement number 1 was provided by, let's say, Mona. Mona is an executive in the bank. When I say executive, she has high power and she has high influence. Then we have maybe Rupam. Rupam is also maybe a VP, and he is also high power, high influence. Then we have this third requirement from a call center rep. Call center representative, low power, low influence, and so on. So people who have very high authority or power and high influence, they would not even listen to a call center rep and say, my requirement is really important. What would the call center rep say there? So this was the challenge that most organizations have faced, that when solutions are built, they mostly contain requirements of high value stakeholders or highly powerful and highly influential stakeholders. They contain, and sometimes we forget about these other people whose requirements may be may even be more important. So what happens now? Mona's requirement, whatever the requirement is, what business value does it deliver? They say it delivers low business value, so it does not check it. This doesn't check. Stakeholder agreement, only Mona says, I want it. Rest of the stakeholders say, we have no value to this. Doesn't check this also. Urgency, is it urgent? No, she says, this report will only come to me. I want this fancy report, right? It's not very urgent. Regulatory, it's not regulatory. She needs a PDF report, not urgent. Now look, even Mona, who has high authority in the organization, now cannot say anything because her requirement in front of everyone did not check most of the indicators here or most of the criterias. So what happens? Her requirements becomes low priority. Then we go to the third person call center rep. High call center rep says, our calls are dropping every day and we are losing our clients. And if these calls did not drop, our revenues will increase by 30%. High business value. This is high business value. All stakeholders agree this is a great challenge. Our revenues are decreasing because of this reason. All stakeholders agree. Is it urgent? Absolutely, got to fix this problem. Otherwise, we'll continue to lose business. Is this regulatory? Maybe not a regulatory requirement, but we got to stay on top. High risk, it's a threat to us right now. And to fix this, maybe it is not a low-hanging fruit or a quick win, but we got to do this. So look, one requirement checks so many different criteria. So now Rupam and Mona cannot tell this call center rep, just because you have no authority, power, or influence in the organization, your requirements will not be met. My voice will be heard, yours will not be. That idea of whose voice will be heard in this current landscape now has been addressed in many ways by organizations. They're creating some kind of a prioritization model, right? Most of the business analysts, when they collect the requirement, the next step is let us now prioritize the requirements because we have constraints or limitations of 3 months and 500K. What do? Let us facilitate a session to prioritize the requirement, and every requirement must check on some of the indicators like business value, stakeholder agreement, urgency, regulatory nature of requirement, risk, and low-hanging fruit. If the requirement check most of these items, they become high priority requirement and will be delivered in the immediate release. And rest of the requirements will be deferred for future releases when the funding and time becomes available, right? So by using business analyst, if you go by the voice of people, only requirements of high value stakeholders, highly powerful stakeholders, highly influential stakeholders will be met. But if you start using prioritization models, what you would do is you will prioritize those requirements that are critical for the organization, and these requirements will help the organization move forward towards the vision and goal, right? So I don't know one interview where they have not asked this question about, tell me about one of the challenges that you faced. And if the business analyst speaks about all other things that are so irrelevant, it doesn't make sense. But if you say, well, most of the challenges that I have faced on my project have been around prioritization of requirement, because when I collected the requirement, for example, at RBC, when I collected the requirements, expectations from the stakeholder was that all their requirements will be met. But considering the constraints of projects such as the time and cost, it was important to prioritize these requirements, and we decided to prioritize the requirements based on their business value, stakeholder agreement, urgency, regulatory nature, risk, and if they were quick wins or low-hanging fruit. In the initially we thought that we would be able to prioritize all the requirements, 120 requirements in 2-hour session. It didn't happen that way. We required another additional 2 sessions, but in the end, we were able to form consensus with our stakeholders on what requirements will be delivered and what requirements will not be delivered. By using a simple technique or fundamental technique in business analysis called basis of prioritization, what should we base our prioritization on? I was able to overcome this challenge of what would be the scope of the project, right? Something that I want you to be ready with when you come in, what is one of the challenges that you faced. So when you go for a business analyst interview, one of the core questions is, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your most recent project. Then it could be the tools and the documents and other things. Then they will jump into, tell us about a time when you faced a challenge. And if you say anything but prioritization, it may not be relevant. All business analysts have to learn this ability or demonstrate this ability to be able to prioritize the requirements. And prioritization of requirements using this technique is called basis of prioritization. And most of the organizations are using this method of prioritization. And the reason they are using this method is because all organizations want to ensure that they focus on critical requirements over requirements provided by people who have high power and high authority. Somehow they have always managed to push their requirement in, right? Somehow they've always managed to push their requirement in. Just like some of these powerful senators from Texas, right? Because Texas has so many congressional ballots and seats, they're able to get so many, what would you say, so many policies focused on Texas passed in the parliament. And the president who controls or who is in power because of Texas playing a very important role, their candidates actually are able to push in so many policies, right? But if even in parliament we decided to create some sort of prioritization model, you would see that good bills will be passed, and only those bills that generate maximum business value, only those bills that satisfy the needs of, if not the entire population, most of the population, only those bills that will satisfy those urgent needs, right? There is a pothole on the road, but you're creating a park. Does not make sense. There are accidents on the highway, but you're building a nice, beautiful park. Who passed this bill is a question that, right? Only those requirements that are regulatory natures will get passed. Only those requirements that cause threats will get passed. Only those requirements that are quick wins for the population. Hey, by the way, we can create a swimming pool in this community where there is no facilities, and kids will be really happy to have some free swimming pool. Low hanging fruit, quick win, right? We got all these people and they will be very happy. A quick win, right? Or we can create a bus stop. People are standing. A quick win. It can be easily done. So keep this in mind, and I'll be sending this question to my team, and I want you to be ready with this answer, right? So prioritization of requirement, keep this in mind. It is a continual process, but 80% of indication, 80% of indication on what is critical for the stakeholder, it's something that a business analyst is able to provide in the beginning, immediately after capturing requirements. We're able to get this indication, 80% indication in the beginning itself. Keep in mind that stakeholders may give you 100 requirements. We must see that these requirements fit the constraint profile, which is what sometimes the project managers know. How much money do we have and how much time do we have? So good business analysts, do you know what they do? They try to understand those 20% requirements, 20 requirements that will satisfy the needs of 80% stakeholders. And how do you do that? You have to use some sort of prioritization model. And this prioritization model, one of the models is, there are many other like Moscow analysis, etc. One of them and most popular is basis of prioritization, something that I just spoke about. And this a business analyst facilitates. Oh, and in this room there are these numerous powerful stakeholders, and the business analyst facilitates this session and ensures that those 20% requirements that meet the need of 80% stakeholders are first or first become the scope of the project. Do we understand this concept? Did we all understand this concept? Do we all understand that as a business analyst in the early days, you don't just have to create the BRD, but you also have to prioritize the BRD and try to fit it into that constraint profile of the project. So is it fair to say that a good business analyst in the early days of a project should have conversations with the project manager and try to understand what are the limitations and constraints? Is that fair? So that when you start meeting the stakeholders, you don't promise them too much. So every time you go to a stakeholder, if you say, oh, well, whatever you're saying will be delivered, what are you doing? You're setting wrong expectations. You won't be able to manage them. Forget about meeting them, right? That's why I use that. I said something like analysts will ensure that they meet the legitimate rights and expectations of stakeholders. And what are these legitimate rights? That generate maximum business value, that are urgent by nature, that maybe are sometimes regulatory, that are quick wins, that are high risk or threats, right? So keep that in mind. So right here, going back to our slide again. So right here, we capture the requirements. The requirement phase starts. A good business analyst collects or elicits the requirement and also prioritizes them. This is one of the greatest challenge that most of the PMs and the BAs will face in the early days. To give this not so good news to some stakeholders and tell them your requirement unfortunately will not become part of it, and you will have to give them a good reason, right? Good basis of de-scoping their requirement, right? Or excluding their requirements. And that basis of prioritization is a great tool to form consensus on what requirements will be delivered and what requirements will not be delivered. Requirement phase. Then the project goes into design phase. This is the time when details about these requirements are created. Details are created. And these details could be documented in a solution requirement document. Let's call it the solution requirement document. Sometimes also called the software, SRS, software requirement specification. Right? So to understand this a little bit better, let's take a look at this here. Let's create a new picture for you now. Look at this. You created the requirement document. So help me out here, guys. So you created the requirement document, which is called the BRD, and the BRD contained 150 requirements. So help me out here. What does a business analyst do now, mostly?
They prioritize.
They prioritize. Absolutely. They prioritize. And this BRD document could sometimes be split into two parts called inclusions and exclusions. Inclusions are the critical requirements, and exclusions are not so critical and can be deferred to the next phase when more funding and more time becomes available, right? So business analysts now look at these inclusions and they start designing. They start the designs for only these inclusions. Why would you waste time on exclusion when you're not working on them, right? You start creating designs for these inclusions. Designs, and the SRD or the SRS. That work starts here. It's part of design, right? So right here, right? So design, SRD or SRS. And how do they do that? By using use case scenarios. How do you provide details? So information technology project management is very structured. It's like, you know, you join an organization, you got templates. They will say, oh, use this template, read this project before. We created a similar template before, read that, and 90% is the same. You're leveraging so much information that already exists, right? So there's a lot of rework. So you don't continue to reinvent things here. So now look, you got inclusions, and the inclusions of the project are: we'll need a home page. Inclusions are: we need a home page. We'll need a contact page. We'll need a blog. We'll need product 1, product 2, and the stakeholder saying, we also want to cut a cake. We want to also have a party. We want to have a recreation event. All these is part of your inclusions. You want to do this too. And there are some requirements that are excluded. For example, the PayPal link excluded. You have excluded building the mobile applications. You are only going to build the online application. You have excluded case studies of your business. You excluded chat with us on the website. You excluded so many things. So look, now when you come to the design phase, what are you designing? Of course, you're going to design the functional requirements or features and functions. Home page, you're going to create a design for this. Blog, you're going to create a design for this. Contact, product 1, product 2. You're going to cut a cake. This is not a system specific requirement. This is just the business wants this, right? It's not going to go on a website, oh, we're going to cut a cake. So you'll have, no. So good business analysts and business system analysts, what do? They look at the business requirement document and only the included requirements, and they separate them into what are the features and functions of the product and what are not. And for the features and functions, they start creating the designs or the SRD or SRS document, right? So someone said, well, so logically, right? Let's say, Mustafa, let's say you are a BSA, business system analyst, and you've been asked to create a business requirement document. Continue to look at this picture, right? You've been asked to create a system requirement document or a software requirement specification. And Mustafa, you've been asked to create a software requirement specification. What is it that, so your project manager said, Mustafa, I want you to create the software requirement specification. And Mustafa said, where is the fill in the blanks? So what did you say to your project manager? Where is the
The requirements.
Very good. Where are the business requirements? Are the business requirements prioritized? Right? 2 questions you asked, and project manager said, yes, this is done. Here you go. You have the inclusions here. Now, what did Mustafa say? Or what did Mustafa do? Mustafa started reviewing the business requirement document because you just joined the project yesterday. You're going to spend a good 7 days reviewing and reading the business requirement document. And Mustafa, when you don't understand a requirement, what do? Just sit on the problem?
I asked them to clarify it.
Who?
I would ask the stakeholders.
No. Who wrote the BRD?
Project
Who wrote the
manager.
BRD? Project manager wrote the BRD?
No, I missed that part.
Business analyst?
The business analyst wrote the BRD,
Okay.
right? And the business system analyst, sometimes you will have dual note roles where the business analyst will document the BRD, hand it over to the BSA. BSA will read the BRD inclusions, decompose system specific requirements only, and leave other requirements like we're going to cut the cake, we're going to have recreation activities, we're going to have party when the product is ready for the BA to handle or the stakeholders to handle. So Mustafa now creates a detailed specification for homepage, and Mustafa says, well, homepage will be provided, homepage will be in English and French, homepage will contain this content, the font size will be this and this and this and this and this. There will be links to some other page, all that. Mustafa starts providing details so that we can hand over these requirements, the detailed requirements, to the development team, and development team says homepage, Times Roman is the font. Content is provided to me, so let me just code it. There are some other links that we need to provide. Let me provide. Mustafa provided all the details. So look, Mustafa said it, and all of us heard it. So in the interview, sometimes, especially in RBC, they'll say, "Have you created technical specs?" Technical spec is nothing but, for a BA, is nothing but a software requirement specification. Have you created technical specs? Of course, we've created technical specs. The first step is to review the business requirement document. Understand the system specific requirements or features and functions. Then start decomposing these requirements to provide additional details. Sometimes I can use use case scenarios for that. Finally, I will facilitate a workshop to achieve a sign-off on that. No work is completed. Did you see how simple it is? BA does all the hard work. BSA gets a starting point. BA has no starting point except for some historical documents. As much as it may feel that it is very easy to go to these stakeholders and collect their requirements, keep this in mind that stakeholders have varied level of authority, their power, their influence. And you know, the greatest challenge that a business analyst faces is not the power and authority. It is actually the attitude of people, right? Attitude could be, stakeholders could be, attitude of a stakeholder could be, stakeholders could be, so attitude of a stakeholder could be, they could be leading, and they would be very helpful. If they are not leading, they could be supportive. Sometimes they will be resistant towards your project. Imagine a stakeholder who is a senior vice president and is resistant. You do not have the authority to even talk to them sometimes, right? Some stakeholders will remain unaware about the project. You will have to speak about your project to them first before they can give you requirement. And some stakeholders will be very neutral. Neutral people are the most dangerous people because you do not know which side they will pick, right? If your friends are neutral and they stay neutral, that means they're not your friends. They're somebody else's friend, right? They want to be good on this side, they want to be good on that side. So one of the ways of choosing a good friend is choose people who are not so neutral. Choose people who have opinions. At least you would know who is your enemy, right? Yes? No? What do you guys think? Right? So people could be leading. They can take your hand and say, I'll show you the direction. Come with me. People could be supportive. People could be resistant. But if you're working and dealing with people who are resistant, who are unaware, and who are neutral, you know what you will have to do? You will have to do more hard work now. You will have to speak with them, address their concerns, ensure that you have their buy-in. Because 80% of the people are either resistant towards, unaware, and neutral. You got to do a lot of work with these people in addressing their concerns, right? Collaboration is the key, as someone had said on day one, collaboration. You got to collaborate with people, get them on side, on your side, on side of the project. Tell them how important and critical this project is. And you can only do this when you know what the requirements are. Otherwise, you will never be able to do this, right? Okay. So don't fear the role of a BSA. Actually, it will be a very good start for you, for your career. And most of the folks are actually becoming BSAs right now, except for a few at RBC. Because if you don't know anything, and then you go meet these powerful people, and if you're showing them that you don't know anything, you have no business knowledge, you're putting yourself in a really bad spot with them, right? So next session, we're going to talk about the software requirement specification, how do we create them, and all that. But there's a very simple question. How do you create a software requirement specification? So let's hear it from maybe Ashia. Ashia, how would you answer that based on my interaction with Mustafa right now? Let's hear it from you. And this is all common sense. So answer from common sense perspective. Don't try to add things to this, okay? All right. How do you create a software requirement specification?
By gathering the requirements.
Or wrong. All right, let's keep moving. Mustafa actually started well. So Bisma, how do you create a software requirement specification based on what you just heard?
You recognize the features and functions of the product and review the BRD.
No, we don't want to start there. Salim, what is it? You are a BSA, join the project. Would you create a software requirement specification?
Based on prioritizing the features that have most value.
No. Let's go to maybe Nida. Nida, how would you create a software requirement specification? Where does this start, this work?
Yeah, by reviewing the BRD document.
There you go. There you go. Now the person who is interviewing you knows that you have been in a project. All what you're saying, right? Because the person who is on the project, they'll close their eyes and they'll say, oh, well, I have to create the design. So what do I need? I need a BRD. What happened prior to this? Right? I need a BRD. I need to review it. I need to understand. Now comes your answers. All of you are saying the right things, but you were missing the first two things. So now I will understand what are the system specific requirements, and I'll start providing details or start decomposing them using use case scenarios. That's it. Good. And then you get it approved. Without getting approved, nothing happens. All right. Great. So awesome. So did you all understand? Right? What does an SRS contain and BRD contain is not in scope for us today, but it is in scope for us in our next session on Sunday. But the session on Sunday, because we have some of our consultants coming to the office, I wanted to have it in the office. So we will start the session at 10:30 in the office, and we will end at about 2:30. This is the time when we're going to bring it all together so that if there was a role that I am hearing today that there is, then we can do your submission after the session on Monday. Is everyone okay with coming to the office on Monday at 10:30? Then we'll have lunch in the office and all that. Good, everyone?
I'm good.
Right?
Fabulous.
Okay, all right, awesome. So that's great. So we will see you in the office. I think today I'm going to just stop at requirement and design. What happens in development, test, and deployment is something that we'll talk about. Then we'll talk about on Sunday, because I wanted you to see a few templates and all that. How does a BRD look like? How does the software requirement specification look like? I want you to feel comfortable. And we're going to take a very simple example. First, create a BRD together, then create a SRS document together, because 70 or 80% of the interviews 70 or 80% of the interviews would be waterfall based. Even if the project is agile, they like to keep it on this side, right? So good. By Sunday, I'm expecting you to be on top of your game with all the questions. I was hearing some great content today, but we want to have, we want to continue to strengthen our knowledge. Tell me about yourself. To start with, my most recent project has been the XYZ Bank, and I've been working with them since June 2019. The primary purpose of the project was to provide similar transact. If we're talking about, tell me about yourself. I have a bachelor's or master's in computer application, over 10 years, always here, right? So, and if someone said, some other questions and all that, they should start with a logical starting point. For example, when I asked this question about, how do you write a SRS document? You don't know what SRS is, but at least logically, when is it created and what should have happened prior to that? What should have happened prior to that is what I will review. I'll understand the system specific requirements. Then I will start decomposing them by providing additional level of details or using use case scenarios, something that we will talk about in the next session. And hopefully you will be able to create a big picture of business analysis on that day, right? So what we'll do is we'll wrap up this session here, and I'll be happy to take some of your questions right now for 5-7 minutes, and then that will be it for today. And then you will receive some of the questions either today or tomorrow.